What the president set out to do was decimate the Iranian military, decimate their ability to wage conventional war. And that military objective, as the president said yesterday, as I said yesterday, has been achieved. And because of that, what the president did is he basically issued an ultimatum to the Iranians. He said, open up the straits, stop trying to hold the world's economy hostage, and we'll engage in a ceasefire. And that's exactly the agreement that we came to last night. The Iranians have agreed to open up the straits. The United States has agreed to stop attacking. And not just the United States, but also our allies have agreed to stop attacking. And that is the basis of this fragile truce that we have, which is now, 8 to 12 hours old. Now, here's what I'll say about this. I've learned a lot about the Iranian system and a lot about the way the Iranians negotiate. As the president told me last night, the Iranians are better negotiators than they are fighters. I'm sure they don't like to hear that, but it's true. But here's a couple things.
Okay, so there we have it from the Vice President of the United States. I'm Andrew Thompson, West East Media. Today is April 8th, 2026, and that's the news of the moment. Today on our live stream, we're going to talk about health and longevity, and particularly advancements in the fight against cancer and how that increases people's lifespans and enjoyment. We're going to find that this is a long, steady slog, but as a frame of reference, I want you to think about a time when I was a kid. One of my brother's classmates and friends was diagnosed with leukemia in the 4th grade, and by the 7th grade, he was no longer with us. Also, one of the teachers in our school was diagnosed with leukemia about the same time and died within a few years thereafter as well. Today, the survival rates for leukemia and lymphoma are typically close to 20 years. Depends on the type. Some of them are actually over 20 years, and every single one of them is well over 10 years now. And for children diagnosed with leukemia, they are almost all expected to live into adulthood and potentially live very normal, healthy, and happy lives, their full lifespan. So this is just a bit of a frame of a reference, and I want to talk about a little bit about the challenges that people see with how cancer is treated and what big medicine is doing. So if we can look at our next video clip.
We'll never find a cure for cancer because then the pharmaceutical companies won't make money. Doctors can't make money because it's the treatment of cancer and the side effects of cancer where doctors earn money. Flaws in that argument is that, obviously, number one, cancer is an entity. It's not one singular disease. It's an umbrella term for hundreds and hundreds of completely different diseases. The biology of breast cancer is completely different to the biology of liver cancer, to muscle-invasive bladder cancer, to penile cancer. Now, there are newer technologies coming in, immunotherapy, which can target specific proteins on cancers. There's CAR T therapy, where you can train your T cells to fight cancer and identify cancer, and then infuse them back into your body, and that's actually cured leukemia and lymphoma in some patients. There is no conspiracy from a medical side of things that we don't want to find that cure. We do.
Yeah, I believe that's 100% true. Are there conspiracies in medicine with pharmaceutical companies? Sure, there are. But if you saw that list that he scrolled through, all the cancers that are being treated, for each one of those types of cancers, there is a doctor, a research center, a hospital, a pharmaceutical company, all seeking grants to fund that's competitive, and it's competitive based on who can come up with the cures. Not only that, the more money they bring in for research and investment in their work to develop the therapy that they're trying to get to, the higher net return that they will get. So, I mean, think about it. If you make 10%, if you make 10% on $1 billion, that's $100 million. If you make 50% on $1 million, you still only get 50 million. The returns are bigger the more money you've invested in the work you do, and the more money you invest, the greater the likelihood that we're going to succeed. So we think about this, we think about how we started this journey, we think about the things that we've talked about before that set the table for our conversation about longevity, beginning with the prophecies that come straight from the Bible in the book of Isaiah. And that is Isaiah 65:20, with the great promise that there's a day coming when an infant won't die in his youth, and that a young man will be someone who's 100 years old, will be considered to be young because they'll still be living a vibrant life at that age. Man, that's what I hope for. That's what I'm desiring. And I think about that more and more as I get to where I am. My grandfather lived to be almost 99 years old, but I had other grandparents who died in their 50s. Things are changing, and they are changing for the better. And that's the good news. Let's look at the survival rate graph that depicts briefly. And if you look at this graph, the blue and the red, the blue is the year 2000, the red is 2025. The various bars on that graph are prostate cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer, lung, and pancreatic cancer. Okay. And here's a couple of things to note. Every one of them has improved. And in fact, at the lower end, they've improved significantly. And the only reason they haven't improved as much in prostate and breast cancer survivorship is there already pretty high rates of survivors at that point in time. But if you consider colon cancer, lung cancer, and pancreatic cancer are all on the rise fairly quickly. Now, the bad news in that, or the sad news, the tragic news, is that those rates are still pretty low, and particularly with lung cancer and pancreatic cancer, which are still significantly below 50%, even at the 5-year mark, and pancreatic cancer has not reached 20% yet. But there are some advances, and we're going to talk about that one in particular as we move forward. So if we could look at our next slide, and it's a bit more of it gets into the actual numbers of what those survivor rates have turned into over the years. So I wanted to show you that and give you a second to think about it. And then as we move ahead, we've got some more information from people who know more than I do about the advances that are being made against these cancers.
This Spanish scientist just cured pancreatic cancer for the first time in history. Pancreatic cancer has a 5-year survival rate of just 13%. Treatments barely work, but researcher Mariano Babacid and his team tried a new approach to shut down the cancer's main driver and its support systems. In lab tests, mice with human pancreatic tumors were treated. And for the first time ever, they stayed completely cancer-free with no major side effects for over 200 days. It's not a human cure yet, but scientists says this breakthrough could change pancreatic cancer treatments forever.
200 days. That seems like a very short period of time in an overall lifespan, but that's 200 days of a lease on life for people who previously thought they had no help and hope. And that is against one of the most horrible diseases known to mankind. It's a death sentence for almost everyone. I remember when Michael Landon, the star of Little House on the Prairie, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and he tried to be very, very courageous as he lived about a year with the disease, and then he succumbed. We're making progress. It's slow, steady progress, but thanks to immunotherapies, and we're going to learn more about them right now, advances are being made, and they're coming rapidly.
This is a cancer research study in 2025 for one of the scariest ones, pancreatic. It sounds funny, but there's a rationale behind it. This pill transfers healthy bacteria from a normal human stool into a cancer patient's gut. Why would you want to do that? For some cancers, we don't use traditional chemotherapy at all anymore. Since 2014, we use something called immunotherapy, and this is how it works. Cancer cells have things on their surface that tell the immune system, hey, we're totally normal, don't attack us, even though they're definitely not normal. And the immune system just struts on by, letting this mass grow. But immunotherapy blocks that off. Now the immune system thinks, This is kind of weird. Let me pull on this, and when that happens, the cancer cell dies. It suddenly spills out all of its contents. Now the immune system thinks, hey, wait a second, these aren't supposed to be here. Let me check this out. And now the tumor gets attacked by the immune system, enabling the body to handle this inappropriate growth itself. Because this is associated with the immune system, we found out that when patients have a very particular composition of bacteria in their gut, this makes immunotherapy even more effective. But here's the problem. Pancreatic cancer encloses itself inside a hard, fibrous shell. Most other cancers don't do this. So this prevents medicines from getting in, and immunotherapy doesn't work. We do still use chemotherapy in pancreatic. That's why pancreatic cancer is different. You often can't do surgery here because of how many ultra important, huge blood vessels are here. You so much as nip a little hole in one of these and the patient's gone. But chemotherapy does shrink pancreatic tumors somewhat. It's not ideal, but it's what we have right now. So the hypothesis here is that with a poop pill, can we steer the patient's gut microbiome closer to one favorable to activate the immune system to attack the pancreatic tumor if conventional therapy is able to help?
That's fascinating. Poop therapy. Who would have ever thought that? But you know what? When you're facing the end of your life due to a diagnosis with pancreatic cancer, you'll probably try a lot of things. And a lot of things have been tried in the past. I remember when Laetrile, apricot pits extractions were the cutting edge therapy for pancreatic and other types of cancer. And thanks to President Trump in his first term, we do have these opportunities for use during emergency use that we never had before in terms of treatment. And it's saved a lot of people's lives, actually, even though there are times there's a risk associated with it, and your life may actually be shortened. But when you try something like this type of therapy, you've got some very unique things working in your favor. Who would have thought it? It's very deeply scientific. And the only way we ever get to know that is through experimentation. God has the protocol for every bit of this. And someday we'll reach way beyond it, and this will seem like child's play. But right now, these therapies are great because they're giving more people more hope for longer periods of time. Let's continue to look at some of the advancements in cancer therapy in recent years.
In the history of cancer treatment, this has never happened before, as in a drug trial, the cancer vanishes from all patients. And I know exactly what you're thinking, because the top comment is that the scientists are going to tragically and suddenly pass away, but you need to know this. The reason why you hear about all these promising results but then never hear anything afterwards is because cancers are incredibly complicated. There's no single magic bullet that's going to be able to cure all of them, and that's part of the reason that we do biopsies, because we need to do a genetic profile of these to be able to see which medication will work the best. The specific medication with the 100% eradication rate is a type of immunotherapy, which means that it attaches to the cancer cells and then helps the body's immune system to be able to identify and kill them. This cancer clearance was done on 42 patients with colorectal cancer, and sorry conspiracy theorists, even though it needs more study for this use, it's already been licensed for 2 years for this.
Oh, doctors in danger. Most of us have heard stories about situations where a doctor was mysteriously died shortly after coming up with some type of new medicine, new treatment. We've heard that about inventors as well. And it could happen, and it does happen from time to time. And we don't know, we never able to determine who did it or why sometimes. But there's so much out there. There's so many opportunities and so much advancement that's occurring. I mean, this is a beautiful story, and it's so promising. If we think back 10, 15, 20 years, immunotherapy was almost an unknown idea in treatment. Today, it's becoming the standard of care. If we think back 20, 25 years ago, things like Gleevec and new drug protocols that treated the system chemotherapeutically differently than its predecessors. Now we've advanced beyond advancements in chemotherapy. We were also seeing back then how radiation treatments that were so highly targeted for prostate cancers and certain other types of cancers could absolutely shrink the cancer cells to the tumors to so small that they weren't even a threat to the human host afterward. So all of these advances have taken place at the same time. And now I want to talk to you a little bit about something called checkpoint therapy with Dr. Lee and his take on immunotherapy and where it's at today.
When you actually have immunotherapy, your own immune system working in the best possible way, you can take people with stage 3 and even stage 4 cancer. That's like end stage, game over, no win situation cancer. All right. And you can, with your own immune system jacked up, you can actually tackle that cancer and you can turn stage 4 to stage 0. It is not happening for everybody yet. We have a lot of work to do to figure out in research how to make more people respond. But we're beginning to discover that if you actually give people with colon cancer who are going to respond to immunotherapy, you can really have a dramatic response. There's a number of people out there on social media that are talking about their stories on immunotherapy. One of the most important ones are called checkpoint inhibitors.
So checkpoint inhibitors, and he goes on to talk about that. So if a cancer is progressing through the stages, and if you are being treated, as you get your updates with your doctor, there are ways to inhibit the growth of the cancers that we never had before. So much is happening on the cancer front today, and so much is going to be happening in coming years. It's in diagnosis, it's in treatment, it's in the types of therapies, and it's in the way that people are living their lives after they have a cancer diagnosis. So the future of cancer care has a promising look that it never had before. And here's a good story from someone who's very well versed on the issues of cancer treatment and where we're headed with it in the future.
So we're thinking a lot about what the next 50 years will bring. Actually, we get asked that question a lot. I hope in 5 years, let alone 50 years, we're talking about survivorship. We're talking about something called interception, where we get the sense that a patient is on the road to an invasive cancer, and we want to stop that process with biological means, immunological means, new types of radiation therapy, new types of surgical approaches, medical approaches, immunotherapy, gene therapy. We want to use some of those techniques to prevent cancers, to intercept cancers, before a patient ever has to face the need for a therapy.
Wow. I mean, that's really powerful. Thinking about the next 50 years, the next 5 years, thinking about changing how our prognoses work away from the idea of survivorship to interception of cancer, to not just early diagnosis, but to prediction of who is going to have cancer in the future, what the gene therapies do, and how much difference they can make. So it's a beautiful story that's still unfolding. There's a lot of sad endings. I can't tell you how many relays for life I went to when I was with the American Cancer Society, but I was seeing, you're always seeing burgeoning hope. We've seen that with cancer treatment for over 100 years now. But today we're getting to a point where some of cancers are almost completely eradicated, and even the worst forms of cancer are beginning to be highly treatable. We have a lot to look forward to, and it's great. So instead of suffering through an end to life or seeing a loved one suffer an end to life that feels like something you have to lay down and almost quit and cry and live your life in pain. Instead of doing that, I hope you'll all dance. Yes, indeed. Thanks for joining us, folks. We'll see you next time.